Bob Smith, a professor of geophysics at the University of Utah, is questioning what may be causing a string of earthquake swarms at the supervolcano that rumbles underneath the Yellowstone National Park. The professor goes on to say that he has never in his lifetime seen the swarms that are happening now, and adds to citizen researchers' concerns that the caldera may soon be coming to life. Health officials in Taiwan are warning that cases of dengue fever, a virus that can be transmitted to humans by the bite of an infected mosquito, are expected to rise after the flooding caused by Typhoon Usagi begins to recede. Voters in Switzerland have overwhelmingly decided to continue mandatory military service, or what is otherwise known as military conscription. The vote on Sunday is the third time that citizens of the country have rejected an attempt to reconstitute an institution that is regarded by some as an outdated practice, but by others as a way to keep an armed militia of trained citizens throughout the country. And to wrap things up, cases of viral encephalitis are continuing to rise in the Uttar Pradesh region of India. Scientists suggest that chemicals found in water supplies may be changing the genetics of wild birds. A study by the University of Geneva in Switzerland shows a dangerous amount of chemicals in bottled water. Melting glaciers have exposed an ancient forest in Alaska, and a single earthquake in Guam broke the 5.0 mark in today's Quake Watch. And that's it for this episode of News in 2 Minutes.
And we check in again with two people who've helped us keep up with the continuing crisis. Arjun Makhijani is an engineer specializing in nuclear fusion. He's the president of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research. Kenji Kushida specializes in Japanese studies at Stanford University. Welcome back to both of you. Arjun, first let me start with you. How serious are these new revelations about the water contamination?
Well, the last time we spoke, we talked about the leak, and there were radiation levels that could give a worker an annual radiation dose in 12 minutes. Well, more recently, there have been reports that the radiation levels near another tank are 1,800 millisieverts per hour. This is an extremely high level of radiation. A few hours basically constitutes a lethal dose. So now we're talking about radioactive contamination in these tanks, the liquid stored in these tanks, that are very highly radioactive. And so these leaks are extremely problematic for the workers and for management.
And is this something they just discovered, or what suddenly causes the much more serious amount of levels?
Well, the best I can understand from all the confusing information there's out there is the first measurement was done with an instrument that only went up to 100 millisieverts and maxed out.
Yeah.
So now they're making more measurements, and they're finding there are more contaminated spots and apparently more leaks. So I'm not quite clear what the company knows when, but the information is kind of dribbling out, and the government is clearly concerned that the situation is getting more out of control.
Well, Kenji Kushida, you pick up on that because yes, there's the company and then there's the government. Clearly the government is stepping in with much more force now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the next election in 3 years is going to definitely reflect their response on this nuclear issue, because they're essentially a pro-nuclear party that just won a landslide election. And so if they can't credibly manage the operator's rescue efforts, and the operator, which clearly seems to be unable to deal with the worst parts of the situation, then the government is on the hook.
But from the outside, it looks like this is taking a long time to get to even the kind of understanding of the contamination levels, that never mind getting to a lot of the more serious work that still needs to be done. What's the sense in Japan, as far as you can tell, about the levels of I don't know, desperation or urgency there?
Yeah, well, similar to what we said last time, the operator's reputation and people's confidence in it, which was already at an all-time low, is now even lower. And after the government essentially de facto nationalized the operator about a year ago and replaced top management, people hoped that the ability of the operator to deal with some of these problems would have been enhanced. But some of the media reports coming from Japan are saying things like subcontractors are now leaking information that the tanks, 1,000 or so tanks that they put together in great haste under severe cost pressure from TEPCO, which was before it was nationalized, right after the disaster, they were put together with bolts but not welded together. And so some of these subcontractors are saying, well, in the long run, even medium run, you'd expect them to start springing leaks. So clearly, the operator hasn't been on top of the situation, and people are getting fairly nervous about that.
So, Arjun Makhijani, explain this idea of the ice wall. It sounds strange. How exactly would it work, and how much has it been tried before?
Well, I don't know that an ice wall like this has been tried before. It's like building a dam underground, but with ice, by freezing all the pore water in the soil. All soil has. So there's water coming in from uphill through the site and going into the ocean, all underground. It's an aquifer. Some of that water contacts the molten fuel and is becoming contaminated. And they hope to freeze the soil basically with a giant freezing machine, just like your freezer at home. They put cooling coils in the soil, lots and lots of them. Takes an enormous amount of electricity, and they would freeze it. Of course, it contains the water behind it like a dam, but eventually it's going to overtop the dam, as it did before. They had another wall that they built. They chemically impregnated the soil to kind of solidify it, and that is what is overflowing into the sea 300 tons a day. So,
well, so it's been done before, but not on this scale, you think? So, I mean, is it how would you describe it? Is it an experiment? Is it a kind of stab at something
It is an experiment,
Yeah.
and I think it's a risky experiment, because if the power fails, you know, just like when the power goes out with your refrigerator, everything will defrost in the freezer. So if this ice melts suddenly and is blocking an enormous amount of contaminated water behind it, then you've got a problem. At the same time, you know, the tanks are themselves something of a threat if there's another earthquake and this highly contaminated water gets into the ocean. And so they've got couple of very, very serious problems of containing the water.
And then, Kenji Kushida, there is still, as we said, the long term here, which I heard talk about decades to decommission the plant, for example.
Yeah, some of the estimates are a minimum of 40 years to decommission the plant. So this idea of frozen underground walls, you know, a massive spending into innovative infrastructure projects can be a good thing, but when it's the last line of defense designed as a permanent solution to a almost seemingly intractable problem, I think the general public would be much more comforted if they saw several options out there rather than all the eggs being put into this potentially risky, unknown, and untested solution that may or may not work.
You were talking about the politics earlier. Is there any uncertainty as to the will to stay with this for the decades that you're talking about?
Well, there's no choice. Given that the party is pro-nuclear and that they do not face elections for 3 years, their interest is definitely to do whatever possible, because if this gets truly out of hand in a much greater sense than now, then their heads will be on the chopping block in the next election. But they'd like to avoid that. That being said, it's not like there's a set of technical solutions that are easily possible here that can be chosen from. So in the very long term, they do need to try to stay in power. So you'd expect them to put as many resources as possible. And as we do see, they are moving, but they need to move much more quickly, as most general public would agree.
Hurry. Something will go away if you don't hurry.
Oh my God, what is that?
I do not know.
Are you taking pictures?
Yeah.
They're going up.
Going out.
Mark. Those are asteroids, like asteroids.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Call somebody, Jonathan. Channel 7. Oh. Go away, Jonathan.
There's like more of them coming.
Another one coming from a way distance.
It's weird because they're disappearing.
Live, this is One for the Record. I'm Diana, and today is September 24th, 2013, and here are your news updates for today. The Watchers watching the world. Massive and very dangerous earthquake, magnitude 7.7, struck Pakistan. Alright, that's the only thing new right now. Moving on. The Extinction Protocol 2012 and beyond. Talks about the 7.7 earthquake. Oh, 7.7 magnitude earthquake creates new island off the coast of Pakistan. Death toll likely to rise. But I guess somehow it made an island. Let's see. Alright, we'll get more of an update on that. Alrighty then. E&E News, the energy news. Nuclear expert, I believe Fukushima fuel melted through at some reactors, gone beyond building, and now it's in the bedrock. Also, official, police state methods used by government to promote nuclear power. Also, ex-chairman of U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, upcoming attempt to remove Fukushima Unit 4 spent fuel is very, very unprecedented. Pool has significant structural damage, will be very risky. Japan expert, cancel plans for trying to remove Fukushima melted fuel, cover buildings with concrete instead. Gee, isn't that what the Russians did immediately after Chernobyl? Almost 3 years later, they're gonna decide that they need to cover it with concrete. Video. Recriticality concerns at Fukushima. BBC. Professor warns underground ice walls could become neutron reflectors and cause nuclear chain reaction. Ugh. Guess making the problem worse, I would assume. U.S. Canada. Oh. I guess President Obama has done his speech at the UN meeting, and I looked to see if it's on the White House on YouTube. It's not on there yet, so when I'm able to get it out, I'll try to post that probably tomorrow. Alrighty then. Nothing new there. Alrighty, stay tuned. We're doing Orbs tonight, and I even have something from the History Channel I'm going to attach. So there you go. Take care. Be prepared for anything. We'll take a look at orbs and UFOs tonight. And I'll see you tomorrow on the flip side. Be prepared for anything. Alrighty then. Take care.
The strange and unexplained filled the skies over Cape Coral this weekend.
Some of you wrote to NBC2. You even shared some video of these bizarre lights, thinking maybe they were UFOs. Well, NBC2 Steve Campy discovered what it really most likely was.
I never saw anything like it before.
Strange sightings in the skies over Cape Coral spark imagination.
They were just like white lights, small in size, you know, and they were maybe 50 foot above the water.
Pete Maschio tells us he saw bizarre lights flicker this weekend off the South Cape.
I've seen things that, you know, don't look normal.
Richard Goby isn't sold, telling us extraterrestrial life may exist, but probably didn't visit Cape Coral.
It's probably reflections. It's probably something off the water that reflects up in the sky.
The Mutual UFO Network tells us many of the sightings could be easily explained with this, what's called a sky lantern. The hot air has filled up this lantern and actually wants to pull away right now, so we're going to try to launch this off and see how far it goes.
The color, the brightness at night, because it gets really bright, they're going to think this is a UFO.
Chris Whiten sells sky lanterns at his Fort Myers store. The fireworks enthusiast tells us some might mistake the increasingly popular contraption for a UFO.
It's going to be heading out, continuously going higher, and it'll get to where it's a pinprick of light because of the distance and the height.
While we can't be certain these lights are man-made, some plan to look up with a watchful eye.
I'll look at it a little more closely.
And perhaps spot something surreal. So Pete, you think we're not alone?
No, I definitely think we're not.
In Cape Coral, Steve Campion, NBC2.
If it was a hoax, they did a really good job. whoever created the hoax. That's all I could say.
Skeptics and debunkers claim that the three bright red lights seen by hundreds of witnesses in the skies above Tinley Park, Illinois, are nothing more than flares attached to weather balloons. But those who actually saw the lights with their own eyes hold a different opinion.
My son and I were on the phone together watching the UFO.
Planes' lights normally flash, but these lights didn't flash.
It was exciting and it was disturbing.
Dr. Ted Ackworth has worked for NASA's Flying Imaging Aircraft program. He is joined by Terrence Masson, an image processing expert from Northeastern University. They begin by analyzing footage shot by T.J. Japcon on August 21, 2004. Ted feels it has the highest image quality of the nearly 30 pieces of video UFO hunters have collected.
My first thought was it was going to be necessary to stabilize because these are shot by normal people, background, handheld, so we've got this kind of swimming motion of that's pretty typical. Once we've done that, I was able to then pick one of the three lights and translationally pin that so that all of the related emotion is basically locked around that point.
Having stabilized one point of the three, Ted and Terrence are able to see how the other 2 points move around it. Are they free-floating or locked in place?
To me, and the numbers bear it out, that it does look like the other two trailing points are locked to that third nodal point and rotating. So either they're fixed to the same physical structure, a triangular craft, or if it's man-made, they have to be some kind of I-beam, some kind of physical connection.
If the lights are all connected, why do they sometimes appear as a triangle and other times appear as a straight line? Is the object shape-shifting? Ted and Terrence's analysis shows that's not the case. The most likely answer is, as the attached lights move in the sky, the only thing that shifts is the viewer's perspective.
To my eye, it appeared that those three lights seemed to be locked together geometrically, and his analysis agreed with that. We now quantitatively know that those 3 points of light are locked in space together.
Ted and Terrence still cannot determine whether there is a solid triangular craft with a light on each point, or 3 individual lights that are somehow able to rotate together. One segment of TJ's footage from October 31st, 2004 shows a conventional aircraft, a helicopter, flying near the triangle shape. The team contacted all local airports, the FAA, Pilots of America, and numerous other aviation organizations in hopes of finding the pilot. One pilot responded saying he had been in the air and saw something strange that night. When asked for an interview, he refused, claiming he feared for his job.
I'm hoping that we can get a sense of the overall size. Is this thing 10 feet across or a quarter mile across? We could take the height of that helicopter image in this frame, and compare that to the height of the lights, and calculate the distance between those two lights.
Because spatially, just in the imagery itself, it's probably about 30 times the linear width of this helicopter, right?
Yeah, that's getting up to 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet as opposed to the width of the helicopter.
So based on this method, I think we're in the ballpark, of 1,000+ feet in separation between these 3 lights.
With their estimate of 1,000 feet between the points of light, Ted and Terrence plug in the location data that Pat has gathered from the eyewitnesses. The GPS locator pinpoints each sighting on the map. The clinometer reading reveals the angle of elevation, or how high off the horizon the lights appear to be. Compass readings indicate in which direction the alleged UFO is traveling. Without this additional information, no true estimate of the size of the object can be made. Based on the clinometer and compass readings, the witnesses all appear to have seen the same object to the west and low to the horizon, between 5 and 10 degrees.
And we know from the footage here from TJ, which is taken from here, looking in that direction, at about roughly a 10-degree elevation, that our object is approximately that distance away from TJ.
And we figured that was about 2.5 miles.
If the unknown object is 2.5 miles away, at an average of 7 degrees off the horizon, and with 1,000 feet between each point of light, then they can estimate its total size.
I think 1,500 is a pretty good estimate, plus or minus a few hundred feet.
It's definitely not the distance from wingtip to wingtip of anything that...
Absolutely not. And I don't know any structure that you could fly that could hold lights 1,500 feet apart.
To the best of their knowledge, the alleged UFO over Tinley Park is one object several thousand feet in the air and about 1,500 feet from end to end.
To put that into a reference to something we might know, think of a 747 or the newer A380 aircraft. Those are about 200, 250 feet in wingspan. So we would have to stack up about 6 of these to get the span that we're seeing from our evidence in this case. And that's just beyond, that's like 6x the largest aircraft that we have.
Based on all of this evidence, the video, the spatial recreation, the estimation of motion, the image processing, I don't know what it is. There's definitely something out there of this 1,500 feet span, but I have no idea what it might be.
This could be an elaborate hoax.
People say that there were red flares in the sky.
Don't think that it was some type of a spacecraft. There just wasn't any evidence to me that it was anything other than three lights that were not connected.
Although there's never been an official explanation for the lights over Tinley Park, there are some people who believe that these were nothing more than flares tied to balloons. And it's an interesting theory, one that we have to test. So that's what we're doing here today. We're actually going to set some balloons with flares aloft and see if they look anything like the Tinley Park footage from 2004.
Cleared by local authorities, the test will allow the team to compare the color and intensity of the flares, as well as the way the balloons and flares move in the night sky, with the original footage of the lights over Tinley Park. But Ted's analysis proved the lights were connected by something solid, so if this was a hoax, it was rather elaborate.
We suspect that there's a frame between the lights, an object between the lights that you can't see in the darkness. So what we're doing to test this out is we're building triangles out of the PVC pipe and attaching flares to the end of those corners. So in effect, we're making our own flying triangles out of flares and balloons. Let's see what they look like compared to the footage we have.
As the team unloads their equipment, the weather begins to take a turn for the worse. Much worse.
We're looking at major lightning right now, big storm coming this way. We have to shut this thing down and get inside and get some shelter.
Bill and Pat manage to get the materials for the experiment inside, but the danger is far from over.
They don't call this Tornado Alley by accident.
I grew up in California. We just don't have this. I've seen lightning before. I've heard a little bit of thunder. This is, what can I say, but welcome to Illinois.
As you can hear, we've got a lot of bad weather coming in.
The team is in rural Illinois, in a controlled environment supervised by local authorities. In spite of the weather, the team soldiers on, building the PVC frame. 3 weather balloons, 5 feet in diameter, are filled with helium gas and attached to the frame. But it soon becomes apparent that the frame is too heavy for the balloons to lift.
The larger we got,
the heavier the frame got, and the more impossible it was for the balloons to lift this thing. So it just seems like if they're describing a giant triangle, there's just no way these balloons could lift this thing. It would take possibly hundreds or even thousands of balloons to lift a structure that large.
They know from Ted's analysis the object is massive, and the lights are connected. It's unclear how such a hoax could be possible. Still, the team works to get the balloons airborne and in formation in order to compare the flares to the strange lights on the videos.
I think the lightning has passed. We may have a window to launch.
Sam Moranto and several eyewitnesses from 2004, Bill Dooley and his son Nick, and Bob Peterson and his son Tyler arrived for the test.
Since they saw the lights with the naked eye originally, they're the best witnesses to tell us, hey, this looks like the lights we saw, this didn't look like the lights we saw.
For test purposes, they've also brought the same cameras they filmed the Tinley Park lights with in August of 2004.
So what we want to do is maybe use their cameras to take footage of the balloons that we launch and compare them to their footage from 2004. Let's see how it matches up.
The 3 balloons are attached on a line at 15-foot intervals. A flare is then suspended from each balloon.
Gentlemen, light your flares. Make it one launch. Balloon 2.
Go ahead, Dave.
While Sam and the team have only seen the video evidence of the Tinley Park lights, Bob, Bill, and their sons are eyewitnesses. They know firsthand what the object looked like in 2004. The quality of the colors, the way it held its triangular form, and how it moved across the night sky.
Now, what we saw in the summer of 2004 was much steadier flow of light, not jerking around like they did. The color was bright red, like you'd see a light on top of a cell tower. This was more orange, more pink, so no, nothing like it.
Bob Peterson's initial impression is that the 2004 lights are a hoax, but this demonstration has given him a new perspective.
Based on what I saw tonight, no, I don't think it was a flare. There was just too much that was different about it.
He thought they were flares, but now he's looking at flares, and he says they did not behave the way the lights behaved when he first saw them on August 21st and October 31st.
A final meeting with Sam Moranto reveals that the night of the original sighting, August 21st, 2004, may be part of a worldwide UFO flap. And Tinley Park's history of UFO sightings didn't begin in 2004.
As you may have already found out and have some indication, this area has been a hotbed for activity. Project Blue Book, the Air Force actual investigation into UFO phenomena, actually had one of their cases here in Tinley Park.
What was the case?
The case was 2 young men seeing an unusual object. They reported it, and it was investigated and still remains unknown. And that was in the early 60s.
Was there any other activity around the case that we're working with now?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Pat. We had August, a hot month. Objects very similar to what was seen out here was seen on the 18th in Canada. On the 19th, we have that object over Minneapolis, St. Paul, hovering there for a period of almost 9 hours. Then here we go, the 21st in Tinley Park. After that, Houston, Texas. A few hours later into the 23rd, what do we have in Melbourne, Australia? Same thing again.
Is it possible that these were all sightings of the same object?
What was the date of the Australia sighting?
The Australia sighting was on the 23rd, but remember, their dateline is ahead of us by 16 hours.
What are the chances of these lights popping up here and then in Australia a couple days later?
On the very next day.
Sam Moranto has uncovered video from Australia that appears to show two of the Tinley Park type objects, seen here for the first time.
Oh no, my battery's running out. Oh, no, Mum.
On September 30th, 2005, the same configuration of lights returns to Tinley Park and again is widely seen and taped by the residents. The object appears to be the same one seen in 2004, and yet another sighting occurs barely a month later, on October 31st, Halloween 2005. With all of the evidence gathered for this case, the team waits for Ted to weigh in on the experiment. How will the new footage stand up to the original 2004 video of the mysterious lights over Tinley Park?
When I saw those three lights in the footage, nothing came to mind instantly that, hey, oh, that's a commercial airliner, that's a helicopter. I'm very intrigued. There's something unusual there, and I hope to get to the bottom of it.
Now, with footage in hand, Ted and Terrence are preparing to scrutinize several aspects of Bill and Pat's experiment.
Even with an absolutely perfectly still, calm atmosphere, you're still going to get this kind of unrelated random motion to these 3 points.
Right.
Now, of course, in this case, there was some kind of wind, and they're just all over the place.
As Bill and Pat noted in the field, their balloons behaved erratically in the wind, in stark contrast to the 2004 footage. According to National Weather Service data, on the night of the experiment, winds are clocked at 12 miles per hour. In 2004, the winds are more than twice as strong at 30 miles per hour. Yet the lights do not exhibit the same erratic behavior as the flares and balloons.
I mean, I could imagine a tether, like a nylon filament tether,
right,
but that would only limit the distance this way, but not this way. And we're seeing that they're not kind of bouncing in towards one another and hitting outer limits. They're locked.
What this seems to reinforce to the team is that the 2004 lights must be locked in place via some form of rigid structure. Without this, the light should exhibit the same volatile behavior as the experiment video.
The longer it holds that configuration, the stronger and stronger the case that they are actually locked. That's a pretty important conclusion.
I think so. Yeah, it's definitely not 3 independent floating flares.
But does this prove that the witnesses in Tinley Park and other locations around the world photographed a flying craft? Ted and Terrence also want to contrast the color and light quality of the flares in comparison to the original footage.
Unfortunately, it's very hard to tell with these consumer-grade cameras. The exposure settings and the sensitivity is such that you can shoot dramatically different colored lights, and very often you're going to see them basically bloom to almost solid white. The biggest difference that's pretty clear to me is the intensity differences. Right. The flickering, basically, for lack of a better word, is very evident in the flares.
Ted and Terrence also look for scintillation, any fluctuation in the quality of the light. A constant light source will have less scintillation than a less stable source, like the flares.
To me, it's actually an illuminating source. It's very clear, some kind of light, as opposed to some kind of burning combustion.
Which will have its own variability.
Right.
But Terrence brings up another intriguing point of comparison. The experiment clearly shows the flares dropping residue, but in the original video from 2004, there is no evidence of any residue.
I'd love to be able to say that our experiment and our analysis of the evidence leaves us with a very credible explanation. This was flares floating on balloons. But I can't say that. I think it's extremely unlikely that is the explanation for what we have here.
I could say definitively that there's no way that I can see any kind of tethered balloon, light source, flare or otherwise, would be responsible for the footage that we have. Without saying it's an alien spacecraft, I can definitively say, by the strictest definition, it is an unidentified flying object.
The Tinley Park case is a really interesting case to me. We've got a lot of data. We have a lot of witness testimony. We were able to do some extremely quantitative scientific analysis of our evidence. To the best of my ability, I can't put my finger on an explanation to say, oh, it was something terrestrial. All I can say is that I can't explain what it is, and yet is a highly credible, corroborated case. So there's something there, and I can't explain what it is, and that is very intriguing to me.
I believe we have a genuine, anomalous aerial event that occurred over Tinley Park in 2004. Some people say it was a hoax, but we have no evidence that it was a hoax. Now, I know in other UFO cases, pilots, both military and civilian, have come across these orbs of light, and that could be what we're dealing with here. So in my opinion, this case is still open.
You have to ask yourself, are these people seeing the same object in the sky? Is this a worldwide UFO phenomenon? Or is this a worldwide UFO hoax?
Both scientific and subjective testimony suggests that the object was not flares attached to weather balloons. Video analysis reveals something of massive size. Does the Tinley Park mass sighting and the mountain of visual evidence around it provide a glimpse of an actual UFO? Or are the answers still floating somewhere in the skies above Tinley Park?